It's every parent's worst nightmare. Your child, your baby, the one you've been entrusted to protect, vanishes without a trace. One moment, everything seems fine. The next, everything you knew about your world is turned upside down. This is the story of a young mother's unimaginable loss, the day her baby disappeared from a stroller, right in front of her eyes. The haunting part? It took decades before the truth began to unravel, revealing a web of lies, secrets, and a twist that no one saw coming. A DNA test would be the key to solving the mystery that gripped an entire community for years. But what does it reveal? And could the answers bring more questions than solutions? Let me ask you something. Imagine, just for a second, that you were there with that mother in that moment. Imagine standing there, watching her heart shatter as she stares at an empty stroller. No sign of struggle. No evidence of who took her baby. Only the gut-wrenching silence of a disappearance so sudden, so terrifying, that no one could explain it. For those watching, it wasn't just another missing child case. It became a symbol of heartbreak and helplessness. But what if I told you that the story doesn't end there? What if I told you that decades later, a DNA test would finally give them the answers they had been searching for? You're probably wondering, how could that be possible? Stick with me and you'll find out. This isn't just a story of a missing child. It's a story of resilience, mystery, and unexpected truths that will keep you on the edge of your seat. As we dive deeper, you'll meet the key characters, those closest to the situation, who each played a crucial role in this tale. You'll learn about the mother's journey, the community's response, and the detectives who tirelessly worked for years to solve the puzzle. But there's so much more beneath the surface, secrets that people were too afraid to reveal, and even now, some are still hidden from the public eye.
Why?
What is it about this case that still sends chills down the spine of everyone involved? If you're anything like me, you've probably asked yourself, what would I do if it happened to me? Could you live with the uncertainty? Could you go on knowing that for so long, the truth was just out of reach? Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. This is the moment you've been waiting for. It's a story of loss, redemption, and a final revelation that will change everything you thought you knew. By the end of this video, you'll not only have the answer to a decades-old mystery, but you'll understand the power of DNA testing and how one simple sample can rewrite history. The clock is ticking, and we're about to uncover the incredible truth, one that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the nature of family, identity, and the things we leave behind. So keep watching. Don't even think about clicking away. You've come this far, and the biggest reveal is still ahead. What happened to that baby? And what does the DNA test really say? The answers are coming, and you won't believe them when they do. Stay with me because we're just getting started. But before we continue, let's pause. There's something crucial you need to understand about the investigation and what was discovered in those first few years of searching. It's what no one saw coming. But before we get there, think back to that day, the day the baby vanished. What were the clues? What did the witnesses see? Hold that thought, because in the next part, we'll dive into the shocking twists that led to that life-changing DNA test. Keep watching. You're about to hear the truth. As we take a closer look at the circumstances surrounding the disappearance, we begin to understand that this isn't just another random case. There are details, subtle clues, and unsettling patterns that begin to emerge, ones that paint a far more complex picture than anyone initially believed. You see, the mother, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, wasn't just any ordinary mom. She had a life before the tragedy, a life filled with promises, dreams, and plans for the future. At 25, Sarah was a vibrant, hardworking woman, a part-time teacher, and an active member of her community. She had a supportive circle of friends and a family that adored her. But after the day her baby vanished, Sarah's life took a darker turn. She became a shadow of herself, a person lost in the memories of a time when everything seemed normal. And while she never gave up hope, there was an unshakable feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, someone had taken her child on purpose.
But why?
And who would do something so unimaginable? To understand the events that led up to that fateful day, we have to go back a few months. Sarah had been struggling with something she hadn't fully shared with anyone, not even her closest friends. She had been having strange feelings of being watched, like someone was always around the corner, lingering just out of sight. It started small, odd phone calls in the middle of the night, and shadows in the street when she walked home from work. But soon, the feeling became more pronounced. At first, she brushed it off as paranoia, a side effect of being a young mother constantly worried about her baby's safety. But as the days went on, her anxiety grew. She even confided in her mother, telling her that she felt like someone was following her. Yet, when her mom asked if anything unusual had happened, Sarah couldn't pinpoint any specific event that would explain her growing unease. And then there were the strange incidents in the weeks leading up to the day the stroller was left unattended. People in the neighborhood started noticing things that seemed off. A woman in a red jacket was seen lurking near Sarah's house on several occasions, always with a phone in hand, always watching. At first, no one thought anything of it. But when Sarah's baby disappeared, that same woman seemed to vanish without a trace as well, like a ghost in the wind. Was she a bystander? A concerned neighbor? Or something more sinister? Sarah couldn't remember ever speaking to her, but the woman's presence was undeniable, like a lingering memory she couldn't shake. As we moved through the weeks following the disappearance, things start to take another unexpected turn. A man, Michael Donovan, came into the picture, a name that would soon be tied to this case forever. Michael, a local businessman with a reputation for being charming and well-connected, was someone Sarah knew, but only in passing. He lived just a few blocks down from Sarah and often ran into her at local events. There was nothing extraordinary about their interactions, nothing to suggest that he had any personal connection to Sarah or her family. But after the disappearance, something strange began to surface. Michael, who had been known to help families in distress with donations and volunteer work, began showing up at the local police station more than once, offering information, asking questions, and even making suggestions about where the investigation should focus.
Why was he so involved?
And why did it feel like his presence was more than just good intentions? As the investigation continued, several of Sarah's friends began to turn up with questions of their own. Some had heard rumors about Michael's past, rumors that painted a very different picture of him than what was presented to the public. Was he truly the philanthropist everyone believed him to be, or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? Meanwhile, Sarah's own relationships started to fracture. Her partner, Tom, who had always been her rock, became distant and unresponsive, as if a wall had suddenly been built between them. Was it grief? Or was there something else? Something he wasn't sharing? He became withdrawn, avoiding questions about the case, and eventually stopped attending meetings with the police. Friends and family started whispering, was he hiding something? Did he know more than he was letting on? But even Sarah herself couldn't shake the nagging thought that perhaps she had been looking at the situation all wrong. Could the answers lie closer to home than she had realized? In the midst of the investigation, a breakthrough came when a piece of crucial evidence was discovered in an old attic in Sarah's childhood home. It was a photograph, a faded, yellowed picture of Sarah's mother, taken years before Sarah was even born. At first, it seemed innocuous, but something caught the eye of the lead detective. In the background of the photo, behind Sarah's mother and her friends, was a man, Michael Donovan. But how could this be? What was he doing in a photo that seemed to date back long before he had become a part of Sarah's life? This was a question that nobody had an immediate answer to, but it opened up a floodgate of questions. What was Michael's true connection to Sarah's family, and how deep did the roots of this mystery go? Suddenly, the lines between friends, neighbors, and suspects began to blur. What had started as a straightforward missing child case quickly morphed into a twisted tale of deception, secrets, and tangled relationships. With every passing day, more and more questions piled up, and every person involved seemed to have something to hide. As the DNA test loomed on the horizon, the fear grew. Would it reveal the shocking truth that no one expected? Or would it leave everyone more confused than ever? The tension in the air was palpable, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Stay with me as we move forward, Because the answer that Sarah has been waiting for all these years is closer than ever. The DNA test is coming, and it will change everything. But before it does, there are still many pieces to this puzzle that need to fall into place. Just when you think you have the answers, you'll realize that nothing is as it seems. Hold tight, because the truth is far more complicated than anyone could have ever imagined. Just when it seemed like Sarah was finally getting closer to the truth, everything started to unravel. The lead detective, Detective Harris, had been tirelessly working on the case for months. The photograph of Michael Donovan from Sarah's mother's past had raised enough red flags to open up new avenues of investigation. But as soon as the photo was examined, something unexpected happened. Sarah's entire case file was compromised. Key evidence mysteriously disappeared from the police station. Files vanished, and even the photographs from the old attic were no longer in the system. It was as though someone had deliberately wiped away everything that could have brought the answers into focus. Detective Harris, frustrated and growing increasingly suspicious of the situation, could offer no explanation. The department's investigation was suddenly plagued with technical failures and unexplained delays, making it feel like forces were working against them. The more Sarah pushed, the more the walls seemed to close in on her. But it wasn't just the missing evidence that threatened to derail everything. There were whispers, too. Late one night, while Sarah was sitting alone in her living room, a knock on the door broke the silence. When she opened it, standing there was her old friend and former neighbor, Laura, who had always been like a sister to her. Laura had been a constant presence in Sarah's life, even helping with the baby before everything fell apart. But tonight, there was something different about her, something in her eyes, something that made Sarah's heart race. Laura stepped inside, her voice low and urgent. "You need to stop," she said. "Just let it go. Leave it alone, Sarah. You're going to get yourself hurt if you keep digging." Sarah froze. This wasn't the Laura she knew, the loyal friend who'd supported her through thick and thin. What was she so afraid of? Why was she urging Sarah to back off from the investigation? Had Laura always known more than she had let on? Sarah's mind raced, wondering if there was something in Laura's past that was tied to the mystery. Could she have been involved in some way? Or was she simply trying to protect Sarah from the dangerous truths lurking beneath the surface? Despite Laura's warning, Sarah couldn't stop. She couldn't give up now, not when so many pieces were still missing. But as she pushed forward, things only got worse. One night, while searching through old family documents in the attic, Sarah found a strange letter, one that had been hidden away in a box, tucked between old baby clothes and forgotten toys. The letter was addressed to her mother, but the signature was unfamiliar. As Sarah read through the letter, her breath caught in her throat. It was a letter of apology, but the sender was someone she'd never heard of, a man named Gregory Donovan. The name Donovan struck a chord with her, and the realization hit hard. Gregory was Michael's father. But what was his connection to Sarah's mother? And why had Sarah's mother kept this letter hidden all these years? The letter didn't offer answers, only more questions. It mentioned a deal and referenced promises made in the past, promises that seemed to weigh heavily on Sarah's mother's conscience. What kind of deal had been struck so long ago, and how did it tie into the disappearance of Sarah's baby? It felt like a dangerous puzzle piece, one that was better left untouched. But Sarah's instincts told her that she couldn't stop now. She needed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As Sarah dug deeper into the history between her family and the Donovans, she began to uncover something even more unsettling, an event that had been kept in the dark for years. A secret, buried so deep in the past that no one had dared to speak of it. It seemed that, years before Sarah's baby went missing, there had been another tragedy. A child had disappeared from the Donovan family's care under mysterious circumstances. The incident had been hushed up, with rumors of foul play swirling, but nothing ever came of it. Was it possible that Michael's family had been involved in yet another disappearance, one that had been conveniently swept under the rug? And if that was true, was Sarah's baby just another casualty in a much bigger scheme? But just when it seemed like Sarah was starting to piece everything together, things took another strange turn. A man named Frank Wells, a private investigator hired by Sarah to look into Michael Donovan's background, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. Frank had been a key ally in the investigation, someone who had been digging into Michael's past and had uncovered connections between him and the Donovan family that could have blown the case wide open. But before Frank could reveal everything he knew, he was found in his apartment, a victim of what appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. The police ruled it as an accident, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Frank's death was no coincidence. Someone was clearly trying to stop the truth from coming out. But who? With each new discovery, Sarah found herself facing unexpected obstacles, as though there were powerful forces working against her at every turn. And despite all the evidence piling up, she still felt like she was missing something crucial. The DNA test, which had promised to deliver the answers, now seemed like a distant hope. Was she getting closer to the truth, or was she merely uncovering more lies? And what if the answers she sought could destroy everything she had believed about her family, her life, and even herself? The deeper Sarah delved, the more tangled the web became, leaving her to wonder if the truth was something better left hidden. The twists just kept coming, and Sarah's journey was far from over. As she stood at the edge of a revelation that could change everything, she was left to question her next move. Was she really ready to uncover the full story, or would some truths be better left buried? The clock was ticking, and the only certainty was that the answers were out there, waiting to be uncovered. But at what cost? Stay with me, because we're about to step into the next chapter of this haunting mystery. The truth is closer than ever, but it might just be more than Sarah and you can handle. As the days dragged on and Sarah's obsession with the case deepened, the tension surrounding her life only escalated. It wasn't just the disappearance of her child that haunted her anymore. There was a growing sense that everything around her was somehow connected in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. And just when it seemed like Sarah's world was spiraling out of control, another disturbing development sent shockwaves through her already fragile reality. Sarah's best friend, Megan, who had been her rock through the darkest times, began to receive mysterious messages that mirrored the ones Sarah had been getting all along. At first, it was a phone call, a strange, robotic voice on the other end of the line, warning Megan to stay away from Sarah and her investigation. Then came an email, sent from an anonymous address, with nothing but a cryptic message: "The past will repeat itself if you don't stop looking." Megan, terrified, immediately confided in Sarah, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't just a prank. Something was happening, something darker than they had realized. What's worse, Megan revealed that she had been followed home more than once by a car with tinted windows, and she had even spotted the same red-jacketed woman who had been lurking near Sarah's house months before. But it didn't stop there. As the weeks passed, Megan's phone started glitching, receiving texts with strange coordinates, locations she'd never been to. One of those locations turned out to be a remote cabin in the woods, a place that had never been on any map. How did someone know about it? And why was it suddenly becoming part of the story? Megan couldn't help but feel as though she was being drawn into a web far too dangerous for either of them to escape. As if that weren't enough, a piece of evidence surfaced that contradicted everything Sarah had believed about the case. A local news article from years ago suddenly resurfaced, one that had been forgotten for a long time. It seemed like a small detail at first, a blip in the larger picture, but it became impossible to ignore. The article described a child, not Sarah's baby, but a child of similar age, who had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances, one that had occurred in the same neighborhood Sarah lived in. The chilling part? The date of that disappearance was only a few months before Sarah's own child had gone missing. This new revelation opened up a whole new set of questions. Had Sarah's baby been the intended target of a pattern that had been occurring for years? Or was the news article merely a coincidence, another distraction in an already complex mystery? Sarah's mind raced as she pieced together the implications. The more she thought about it, the more the pieces refused to fit neatly into place. The missing child in the news article had been found years later, but under circumstances so strange that the authorities had never fully understood what happened. The child, now an adult, had claimed that they had been watched for most of their life by a shadowy figure, someone who always stayed just out of reach. The resemblance to Sarah's own experiences with the red-jacketed woman sent a chill down her spine. Could the same person have been involved in both disappearances? Was this an elaborate game played by someone who had orchestrated these events for years? But as Sarah confronted Megan with this new lead, the stakes grew even higher. Megan's warnings to Sarah became more urgent as she, too, found herself at the center of a tangled conspiracy she couldn't fully comprehend. The pressure weighed heavily on both women as they were forced to confront the possibility that someone close to them might be pulling the strings. Was the mysterious figure in the red jacket part of a larger group, one that had been operating in the shadows for years, manipulating everything from the very beginning? And more chillingly, was it possible that Sarah's own family had ties to this group, ties that ran deeper than she could have ever imagined? The question of trust hung like a dark cloud over Sarah's head. Could she trust Megan, her lifelong friend, who was now being dragged into the same terrifying situation? Or was Megan herself somehow entangled in a web of secrets and lies? As Sarah worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, she found herself questioning everyone around her. Her partner, Tom, had remained distant throughout the investigation, his coldness only growing with each passing day. His reluctance to discuss the past, his quiet, almost too perfect demeanor, it all seemed wrong. What was he hiding? Was it possible that Tom knew something about the disappearance that he wasn't sharing? Or was he simply as lost as Sarah in this complex puzzle? Meanwhile, Sarah's interactions with Michael Donovan became increasingly unsettling. The more she dug into his past, the more layers she uncovered, and each new revelation only made him seem more involved in a way that didn't sit right with her. He was charming, smooth-talking, the kind of person who made people feel safe. Too safe, perhaps. When Sarah cornered him with questions about his family's ties to the Donovan name, his reaction was far more defensive than she had expected. He deflected, offering vague answers that did little to explain his presence in the old family photograph or his connection to the mysterious Gregory Donovan. But the more Sarah probed, the more the feeling of unease grew. Was Michael truly trying to help, or was he manipulating Sarah into trusting him for some greater, more dangerous purpose? The deeper Sarah went, the more the line between ally and enemy blurred, and the more she felt like she was being played by forces far more powerful than she had realized. Every step forward seemed to lead her in a new direction, only to be met with another obstacle, another mystery, another layer of deception. And as if to remind her of the stakes, the mysterious phone calls continued, now growing more menacing. "You'll never find her," the voice on the other end whispered. "Stop before it's too late." Sarah didn't know who was behind it, but the warning only pushed her to keep going, to dig deeper, to expose the truth that was buried beneath layers of lies. But even with all the pieces falling into place, the final twist was still out of reach. Sarah was close, but the truth was slipping through her fingers like sand, and every step forward felt like it only pushed her deeper into a trap. Time was running out, and every answer she uncovered seemed to raise even more questions. Would Sarah find the truth before it consumed her? Or was she already too far gone, entangled in a web that had been woven long before she ever came into the picture? The stakes were higher than ever, and the shadows that loomed over Sarah's every move only grew darker with each passing day. As the mystery deepened, one thing was certain: no one was who they appeared to be, and the truth, when it finally emerged, would shatter everything she thought she knew. Stay with us, because the answers are coming, and the consequences will be far greater than anyone could have imagined. Just when Sarah thought she had begun to untangle the truth, something happened that made her realize just how deep into this nightmare she had gone. It all started one evening as she sat in her living room, staring at the disorganized notes she had been compiling for weeks. The walls of her house seemed to close in around her, the weight of the mystery pressing on her chest. She was so consumed by it all, by the puzzle she was desperately trying to solve, that she hadn't noticed how quiet everything had become. The phone calls, the cryptic messages, the strange events, it was all beginning to take its toll on her. Her thoughts were racing, and yet, for the first time, she couldn't focus. The world outside her window was eerily still, the streets empty, the air thick with an unsettling quiet. Then, just as she reached for her phone to check for any new updates, the lights flickered. A cold chill ran down her spine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. It was subtle at first, a shadow in the corner of her vision, the faintest movement that she couldn't quite place. She got up, pacing the room in an attempt to shake off the creeping dread. Her fingers brushed against her phone, but just as she was about to check her messages, a knock on the door broke the silence, so abrupt it felt like a punch to her gut. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she froze. Who would be at her door this late? It was nearly midnight. She cautiously approached the door, her mind already running through a list of possibilities. Could it be Megan, worried about the threats she had received? Or maybe one of the police officers investigating the case? But when she opened the door, there was no one there, just the lingering scent of something familiar, like old leather and cigarettes. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the darkened street, but there was no sign of anyone. Only the emptiness of the night, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. She shut the door quickly, locking it behind her, her pulse racing. It was then that she noticed something on the doorstep. A small, weathered envelope, its edges frayed, the handwriting on it so faint it was nearly illegible. She bent down to pick it up, and as soon as her fingers touched the paper, a jolt of fear shot through her. It wasn't addressed to her, it was for Megan. Inside the envelope, there was no message, just a small piece of torn newspaper. The headline read, "Another child missing, unsolved for years." Her blood ran cold. This was not just about Sarah anymore. Someone was targeting everyone close to her, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Was it possible that Megan was in danger too? Was she being drawn into something far darker than either of them could comprehend? The terror that Sarah felt in that moment was suffocating, a weight pressing on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Without thinking, she dialed Megan's number, her fingers trembling. The phone rang, but there was no answer. She tried again, her panic escalating with each unanswered call. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Megan had been her closest ally, the one person who had been with her through all of this, and now she couldn't reach her. Sarah's mind spiraled into a frenzy of worst-case scenarios. What if Megan had been taken? What if whoever was behind this had targeted her, just like they had targeted Sarah's child all those years ago? The fear began to take hold of her, and she couldn't shake the image of Megan's terrified face when she had first shared the cryptic phone calls with her. Had it all been building up to this? Was this the final move in a game Sarah had never truly understood? Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking her out of her thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. She opened it quickly, her heart in her throat. The message was short, but it was enough to make her blood run cold. "Stop looking or you'll never see her again." The threat was clear. And for the first time, Sarah realized the full extent of the danger she was in. Whoever was behind this wasn't just playing games. They were capable of anything. They had been watching her, manipulating her every move, and now they were threatening her in a way that made it clear no one was safe. Not her, not Megan, not anyone. The message left Sarah with more questions than answers, but the urgency was impossible to ignore. She needed to find Megan, and she needed to do it fast. But as she grabbed her coat and rushed out the door, something in the pit of her stomach told her it was already too late. Every step she took felt like it was leading her deeper into a trap. She wasn't just uncovering the truth anymore. She was being dragged into a dark web of secrets, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. As Sarah reached Megan's house, she was greeted by an unsettling sight. The door was wide open, and the lights were off, casting long shadows in the hallway. The air felt thick with something unspoken, and as Sarah stepped inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She called out for Megan, but there was no response. The silence that followed felt suffocating, oppressive in a way she couldn't explain. Every room she checked was empty, but there was something off about the space, the way it felt like it had been disturbed, as if someone had been there just moments before. Her heart raced as she moved to the back of the house, where the sliding door to the backyard stood ajar. The cold night air rushed in, sending a chill down her spine. Something wasn't right. She stepped outside cautiously, scanning the yard for any sign of Megan. But then she froze. There, lying in the grass, was a single item: Megan's phone. The screen was shattered, the device showing no signs of life. It was as if someone had deliberately left it there, a cruel message in its destruction. Sarah's stomach dropped. Had Megan been here? Had she been forced to leave in a hurry? The thought of her friend in danger, of being pulled deeper into this twisted nightmare, consumed Sarah's thoughts. But as she turned to leave the yard, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path. The figure was tall, their face obscured by the darkness. Sarah's pulse quickened as they spoke in a low, gravelly voice. "You should have stopped looking," they said, their words sending a shiver down her spine. The air seemed to grow colder with each passing second, and for the first time in Sarah's life, she felt completely and utterly trapped. "Where is she?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking, but the figure only smiled, a cold, empty expression that sent fear coursing through her veins. They took a step closer, and in that moment, Sarah knew whatever this was, it was only just beginning. The truth was far darker than she had ever imagined, and now, there was no turning back. Just as Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, the figure before her stepped into the moonlight, revealing a face she recognized but hadn't seen in years. It was Daniel, Megan's older brother, the one person who had been just as much a part of her life as Megan had. The shock that coursed through Sarah's veins made her stumble backward, her mind racing. How was it possible that Daniel, of all people, was standing here, blocking her path, seemingly involved in everything she had been unraveling? She had trusted him, believed him to be a victim in all of this, just like Megan, just like herself. But now, looking at him, there was no warmth in his eyes, no trace of the person she once knew. His gaze was cold, calculating, and for the first time, Sarah realized something deeply unsettling. He was playing her. "You shouldn't have come," Daniel said, his voice low but laced with an undeniable threat. The words hung in the air like a warning. Sarah's mind reeled, her breath catching in her throat as she tried to make sense of it all. How long had he known the truth? How much of the story he had been feeding her was a lie? And why had he kept her in the dark all this time? "You don't get it, do you?" Daniel continued, stepping closer. "This isn't about Megan or your child. It's about you and the secrets you've been digging up." The revelation hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. Everything she thought she understood about the case, the mysterious disappearances, the cryptic messages, the threats, had been part of a much darker scheme, one that revolved around her all along. She had been so focused on finding out what happened to her baby, on uncovering the truth about Megan and her family, that she had missed the glaring red flags about her own involvement in the entire mystery. Was it possible that Sarah herself had been the target from the very beginning? Daniel's words, each one more chilling than the last, began to cut through the fog in her mind. "You think this started with Megan, but it didn't. This all goes back to your family, Sarah. Your past. The lies you've been running from your whole life." The breath in Sarah's chest caught, the weight of his words sinking in like a stone. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, taking another step back. Her mind was spinning, her heart racing as she struggled to process his words. "You really don't know, do you?" Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "The child that went missing? That was never your child, Sarah. It was mine." Her blood turned cold. The world seemed to slow down around her as the enormity of what Daniel had just said began to sink in. He was claiming the missing baby wasn't hers, that it had been his all along? How could that even be possible? The very foundation of everything she had believed in, everything she had worked so hard to uncover, was crumbling in front of her. Her mind raced to make sense of it, but the pieces wouldn't fit. Had Sarah been manipulated into believing the baby was hers, only for the truth to be something far more sinister? Daniel seemed to read her thoughts. He chuckled darkly, a sound that sent chills running down her spine. "You were never meant to find out. You weren't supposed to remember. But the truth has a way of creeping up on you, doesn't it?" His words felt like daggers, and Sarah suddenly realized that everything she had been so sure of, her child's disappearance, Megan's involvement, the strange threats, the secrets, had been crafted into a story that wasn't hers to begin with. The story had been someone else's from the very start. For a moment, Sarah stood there, paralyzed. Her entire life, every detail she thought she knew, was built on a lie. What had she uncovered in her search for answers? And who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes? She remembered the pieces of evidence she had found, the torn newspaper, the cryptic messages, the threats, and suddenly they didn't feel like clues pointing to a missing child at all. They felt like breadcrumbs leading her into a trap. A trap designed to make her question everything about herself. "What are you saying?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper, her mind struggling to catch up with the enormity of the revelation. Daniel's expression darkened, his eyes hardening with a quiet malice that Sarah hadn't seen before. "You've been digging up your own grave, Sarah. You think you're looking for a child, but what you're really looking for is yourself. Everything's been connected to you, to your family. You just didn't see it." The ground beneath her seemed to shift, and Sarah staggered, her hand instinctively reaching out to steady herself against the nearby wall. She had trusted Daniel, confided in him, believed he was a victim just like her. And yet, here he was, revealing that the entire mystery was centered around a truth she had never even known existed. The baby, her baby, wasn't hers. Her family wasn't what she thought it was. Suddenly, the air around her felt too thick to breathe, as though the weight of the truth was suffocating her. The questions piled up faster than she could process them. How had she been so blind? How could she have missed the clues, the subtle hints that her entire existence, the story she had so desperately tried to piece together, had been manipulated from the start? Before she could ask another question, Daniel took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "If you want to know the truth, Sarah, you're going to have to go all the way. And I don't think you're ready for that." The warning was clear, and in that moment, Sarah realized that the truth wasn't just a matter of discovering what happened to a missing child. It was about uncovering her own hidden past. And the more she dug, the darker it would get. As she looked into Daniel's eyes, something cold and unsettling took root in her gut. Whatever truth she thought she had been searching for, it was nothing compared to the monster she was about to face. The weight of Daniel's words lingered in the air, thick and suffocating, as Sarah stood frozen in the dim light of the alley. Her mind was a whirlwind, each thought battling for dominance, each revelation more shocking than the last. Her entire world, her sense of self, her past, everything she thought she understood, was slipping away, unraveling faster than she could hold on to it. The truth she had been chasing was no longer about the missing baby or the tangled threads surrounding Megan's family. It was about Sarah herself. And with that realization came a terrifying new set of choices. Daniel was standing there, his figure a shadow in the moonlight, his eyes cold and impenetrable. "You think you can just walk away from this, Sarah? That's what you've always done, isn't it?
Run."
But this time, you don't have that luxury. Not anymore." The venom in his voice sent a chill down her spine, and she felt her pulse quicken, fear clawing its way up her throat. "Why?" Sarah's voice barely escaped her lips, raw with disbelief. She was shaking, but she couldn't tell if it was from fear or the anger that was now bubbling to the surface. "Why are you doing this? Why involve me in all this madness? What do you want from me?" Her mind was racing, the answers just out of reach, the pieces of the puzzle she had so desperately tried to fit together slipping further from her grasp. Every instinct told her to turn and run, to escape this nightmare. But something deep inside held her in place. Something she didn't fully understand yet, but knew was too dangerous to ignore. She had no idea how close she was to the truth, or how much further she was willing to go to find it. But now, standing in front of Daniel, the stakes had been raised, and every choice seemed like a step closer to a point of no return. Daniel's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something more human behind the icy facade. Guilt, perhaps, or fear, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "You're not in control of this, Sarah. You think you are, but you're not. Everything has already been set in motion." He took a step forward, the gap between them closing with each word. I'm giving you a choice, but you're not going to like it. You can walk away from this, forget everything you've uncovered, and live your life safe. But if you keep digging, if you keep asking questions, I promise you, the truth won't just destroy you, it'll destroy everyone you love. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Sarah felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her, her feet rooted to the spot, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Was this it? Was this where the story ended? Was she really being forced to choose between her safety and the truth she had been chasing for so long? Could she turn her back on everything she had uncovered, everything that had driven her to the edge of this terrifying abyss, and simply walk away, leaving the pieces of the puzzle to fall into darkness? Or was it too late to stop now? The hunger for the truth gnawed at her, an insatiable need that burned deep in her chest, but the price was too high, the stakes too enormous. And then, just when Sarah thought she couldn't bear it any longer, another voice broke through the tension, and she whipped around to see Megan standing in the shadows, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and regret. She had been silent through most of this, hidden in the background, but now, as Sarah looked at her, she realized that Megan was just as caught in this web of lies as she was. "I'm sorry, Sarah," Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper, full of guilt and sorrow. "I didn't know how to tell you, but you need to understand, we've all been part of this. We've all been manipulated." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, her mind scrambling to make sense of what she was hearing. Megan's voice, the vulnerability in her words, tore through the protective wall Sarah had been building around herself. It was too much to process, too much to absorb in such a short amount of time. She had trusted Megan. She had believed in her. But now, Megan was confessing to something deeper, something far darker than Sarah could have ever imagined. "What are you talking about?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking under the strain of all the emotions threatening to spill over. "What have you been a part of?" Megan hesitated, her eyes darting nervously between Sarah and Daniel, who was still standing like a silent sentinel beside her. Finally, she spoke, her words tumbling out in a rush. "It's not just about the baby, Sarah. It never was. It's about what happened to you, what happened to both of us. The people who took the child, they're not just after secrets. They're after us. They always have been." The words hit Sarah like a freight train. What was Megan saying? What did she mean? She felt a cold sweat break out on her skin as her mind raced to process the implications. This wasn't just about a child who had disappeared from a stroller. This was about a conspiracy, a hidden agenda that involved more than just her, Megan, and Daniel. It involved them. Everyone they loved, everyone they trusted. The realization clawed at Sarah's chest, threatening to tear her apart. "You've been running from this, just like I have," Megan continued, her voice trembling. "But you can't hide from the truth anymore. You have to make a choice, Sarah. And I can't make it for you." She took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling heavily between them. "You can either walk away, forget everything you've learned, and let it all go. Or you can keep fighting, keep searching for answers, but I can't guarantee that you'll survive it. I can't guarantee that anyone will." The silence that followed was suffocating. Sarah's mind was a blur of confusion, anger, fear, and regret. She had come so far, but the closer she got to the truth, the more it seemed like there was no way out. No safe path forward. Every step she took brought her deeper into a web of betrayal, deception, and danger. And now, she was being asked to make a choice that would determine not only her future, but the fate of everyone around her. But as the seconds ticked by, Sarah realized that there was no easy choice. There was no safe way out. Every option seemed to lead to an impossible conclusion, every path fraught with consequences she couldn't fully comprehend. One thing was clear, this was no longer just a search for answers. This was a fight for survival. And whatever choice she made next, it would change everything. As the words lingered in the air, Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine, and a sinking feeling spread through her chest. What Megan had just said, what they were all a part of, wasn't just about her, or even the mystery surrounding the missing child. This was bigger than she had ever anticipated, a web that stretched far beyond her own life, pulling in more people than she could have imagined. It was a conspiracy, a vast, intricate network of lies and secrets that had been building for years, maybe even decades. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the walls seemed to close in around her. Every single step she had taken, every question she had asked, every answer she thought she had uncovered, had led her here. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. As Megan's voice trembled in the night air, the gravity of the situation became clear. "Sarah, you don't understand," she whispered urgently. "The people behind all of this, they're not just after you. They've been controlling things for longer than you think. They're in places you wouldn't even suspect." A sickening realization hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. Her mind raced back over all the interactions, all the strange moments she had brushed off as coincidence or paranoia. Her best friend, Daniel, who had been with her every step of the way. Her trusted confidant, Megan, who had been hiding the truth all along. The small, seemingly insignificant clues. Someone had been pulling strings from behind the curtain the entire time. And Sarah had been too caught up in her search for the truth to see it. Before she could speak, the sound of footsteps behind her made her whip around. It was Daniel. His face was no longer the calm, collected expression he had been wearing earlier. It was twisted, tight with something darker. Sarah's pulse quickened as he took a step closer, his eyes hard with something that made her stomach drop. "I should have told you sooner," Daniel said, his voice low, almost a whisper. But the way he said it made it clear it wasn't an apology. It was a warning. "But I couldn't. I didn't know who to trust anymore. You've gotten too close, Sarah. Too close to things you shouldn't know." The betrayal hit her like a slap. Everything she had shared with Daniel, everything they had been through together, had been a lie.
He was part of it.
And worse, he had been watching her, waiting for the moment when she would uncover the truth. Her trust had been shattered. Her instincts had been wrong all along. "You were always part of this," Sarah managed, her voice shaking, both in anger and disbelief. "You've been lying to me from the start." Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded, the tension in his posture now palpable. "I didn't want to, Sarah.
But I had no choice."
"None of us did. You have no idea what you're up against." His words sent a cold ripple through Sarah's body. There was more, so much more, that she didn't know. The danger was far worse than she had imagined. The people behind this conspiracy weren't just looking for the child. They weren't just looking for power. They were playing a game far larger, far more dangerous than anything Sarah had ever anticipated. And she was smack in the middle of it, with no way out. As if on cue, Megan stepped forward, her face pale and drawn. "Sarah, it's not just Daniel. It's," she broke off, glancing nervously over her shoulder, as though she feared someone was listening. But it was too late. The sound of car engines revving in the distance pierced the night air, and suddenly Sarah realized just how much danger they were all in. They were surrounded. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed Megan's arm and pulled her toward the alleyway, her heart racing. The footsteps behind them grew louder, closer. Someone was coming. Someone dangerous. Sarah's instincts kicked in, and the fear she had been holding at bay for so long finally broke through. She needed to get away, to find out who was behind this, to escape this nightmare. But there was no escaping now. Not with Daniel so close behind them. Not with the web of lies, so tightly wound around them all. Megan's eyes darted nervously as she tugged at Sarah's arm, urgency in her voice. "We need to go.
Now.
Before it's too late." Just as they reached the end of the alley, a black SUV screeched to a halt, blocking their only escape route. The door swung open, and a figure stepped out, one Sarah didn't recognize at first. But then the face became clearer, and her blood ran cold. It was Marcus, the man who had been helping her all along, the one she had trusted. But now his eyes were cold, his smile twisted, and there was something undeniably threatening in the way he stood before them. "You've been digging too deep, Sarah," he said with a grim smile, his voice dripping with an eerie calmness that sent a shiver through her. "Now it's time to stop." The reality of the situation crashed down on Sarah like a ton of bricks. She had been surrounded by the very people who were orchestrating the conspiracy. The ones she had trusted, the ones she thought she knew. Every single one of them had been playing their part. And now, they were here to make sure she didn't find the truth. She couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, the weight of betrayal crushing her every thought. Every direction, every option, every possible escape route had been blocked off. The truth was within her reach, but it felt like the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. And now, standing in front of her, was the undeniable proof that she was in over her head. The conspiracy wasn't just a shadow hanging over her, it was a looming storm, ready to consume everything in its path. Her heart hammered in her chest as the reality set in. The game was no longer just about the missing baby or the people she had once trusted. It was about survival. And if she didn't make the right choice in the next few seconds, it would be too late. There was no more room for mistakes. No more time to question who was on her side. As Marcus's smile stretched wider, the world around Sarah seemed to narrow, the darkness closing in. The clock was ticking. And the only thing that was certain was that she was about to find out just how far the conspiracy went, and how much she was willing to risk to uncover the truth. The air was thick with tension as Sarah stood facing Marcus, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing, struggling to piece together everything that had led her to this moment. The SUV idled behind him, its headlights casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward her like the fingers of some unseen monster. She could feel the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on her, the suffocating knowledge that she was now standing at the center of something far beyond what she had ever imagined. The people she had trusted, the clues she had followed, all of it had been manipulated. Marcus, the man she thought was her ally, was the one orchestrating it all. And now, standing before her, he was her biggest threat. "Did you really think you could uncover the truth, Sarah?" Marcus's voice was cold, his tone dripping with contempt as he took a step closer, the smirk never leaving his face. "You're just a pawn in this game. Always have been." His words hit her like a slap to the face.
Pawn?
She had thought she was the one pulling the strings, uncovering the mysteries. But here he was, telling her the unthinkable. Everything had been a setup. Her investigation, the missing child, the betrayal, even Daniel and Megan. None of it had been real. She was just part of a much larger plan, a piece in a puzzle she couldn't even begin to understand. But something inside her refused to let him win. She had come too far to let him dictate the outcome. Her breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as she forced herself to stand tall, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "No," she said, her voice trembling, but defiant. "You don't get to decide how this ends." Marcus chuckled darkly, his eyes narrowing in amusement, as if he were savoring every second of her growing desperation. "You think you can stop me? You're not even close to seeing the whole picture." And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A sudden, deafening noise pierced the air, a loud crash followed by the unmistakable sound of tires screeching. Sarah's heart lurched in her chest as she turned to see the black SUV lurch forward, its headlights illuminating the scene like a monstrous creature emerging from the shadows. The vehicle wasn't the only one, though. From the other side of the alley, another car appeared, and then another, each blocking off every possible exit. It was clear now, there was nowhere to run. Her pulse raced as she turned back to Marcus, the full weight of the situation crashing down on her. He wasn't just after her, after all. This was about something bigger, something that spanned far beyond her, or the missing baby. This was about power, control, and the people who had been playing a dangerous game for far longer than she could have imagined. Marcus's eyes gleamed as he took another step toward her, his voice low and threatening. "You're in over your head, Sarah. This is bigger than you could ever understand. It's been bigger than you since the beginning." Before Sarah could respond, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She yanked it out, her fingers trembling as she glanced at the screen. The message was brief, but sent a jolt through her system. "Don't trust Marcus. He's not who you think he is." The message was from Megan. But how? How could she have known? And why was she warning Sarah now, when it was almost too late? Panic gripped her chest as she tried to make sense of the situation, but it was all spinning out of control. She barely registered Marcus's words as he continued to approach, his footsteps heavy, deliberate. Do you really think you can win this? You're nothing, Sarah, he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. Just a reporter, playing with forces you don't even understand. But Sarah's instincts kicked in. She had come too far to back down now. She wasn't about to let him intimidate her. As the world seemed to close in on her, her gaze fell to the ground, where she spotted something glinting in the dim light, an object, a key, half buried in the dirt. The same key Megan had shown her months ago, the one that had seemed so insignificant at the time. But now it felt like a sign, a clue that had slipped past her awareness. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it, the final piece. Sarah reached down and snatched up the key, her fingers gripping it tightly as if it were her lifeline. She held it in front of her, and for the first time, she saw Marcus falter. His eyes widened ever so slightly, and for the briefest moment, the mask slipped. She saw the fear in his eyes. The key was connected to something bigger, something he hadn't counted on. Where is it? Sarah demanded, her voice strong, her fear now channeled into resolve. Where's the rest of it, Marcus? What's it all for? He laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh that sent a chill through her. You think that key means anything? It's nothing. You're too late, Sarah. This game has already been won. But Sarah wasn't listening to him anymore. She wasn't listening to his taunts or his threats. Her mind was racing, and as the pieces started to fall into place, the truth became clearer than ever. The baby, the disappearance, the conspiracy, it was all connected to a much larger operation, one that had been manipulating events, people, and even the truth itself. And she had been its unwitting pawn all along. Suddenly, a realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. The key wasn't just a symbol of power, it was a key to something much bigger. A vault, a hidden cache of evidence that could bring down everything Marcus had worked so hard to build. It was never about the child, it was about what they were hiding. And Sarah had the key. Before she could make a move, there was a flash of movement from behind her. She whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat, and saw a shadowy figure emerge from the darkness. It was Daniel, his face grim, his hands raised in surrender. Sarah, stop. Please. But his voice wasn't pleading, it was desperate, almost as if he was trying to save her from something even worse. Her mind spun, her thoughts chaotic. Daniel was with them? Or was he trying to warn her? She didn't know who to trust anymore. And then it happened. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing the key from Sarah's hand in one swift motion. His grip tightened around her wrist, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. She had no idea what the key meant, what its power truly was, but she knew one thing. It wasn't over yet. This wasn't the end. The final twist was still coming. The air crackled with electricity as Marcus's eyes locked onto hers, a cold smile curling on his lips. You're too late, Sarah, he whispered, just before everything went black. The last thing Sarah remembered was the cold touch of the key in her hand. Then silence. Days had passed since the chaos in the alley, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that everything was still hanging in the air, unresolved. She had found herself lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, as the images of Marcus's smirk, the key, and the mysterious messages swirled through her mind. The truth was still out there, but she knew it was a truth that would never fully be hers to claim. What had happened in those final moments had left too many questions unanswered, too many pieces of the puzzle still scattered and out of reach. But sometimes, the truth wasn't something you could hold in your hands. It was something you could only feel, deep within your bones. The world around her had changed in the wake of it all. Daniel, once a man she had trusted implicitly, had vanished, leaving behind nothing but cryptic messages. But it wasn't just him. There were people she'd never see again, lives tangled up in this dangerous web of deceit and manipulation, all of them lost in the wake of something far greater than any of them had ever imagined. She had uncovered the truth, yes, But it was like peeling away layers of an onion only to realize that what lay beneath was too painful to comprehend. The key, the symbol of so much hope, had ultimately been just a small part of a much larger, far-reaching conspiracy. The vault of secrets that Marcus had guarded so carefully wasn't just about the missing baby. It was about control, about manipulating every aspect of society from behind the scenes. And while she had managed to uncover a sliver of the truth, she knew that the full story would never be completely revealed. The forces at play were too powerful, too dangerous to expose all at once. The pieces of the puzzle she had found were only a fragment of a much larger picture. There was a part of her that resented it, the feeling that she had been so close, yet so far. But the truth, she realized, wasn't always meant to be fully known. Sometimes, the weight of it could break a person. Sometimes, it was better to let the shadows remain. But as Sarah walked through her life, haunted by the memory of everything she had uncovered, she knew she had to move forward. The toll it had taken on her was undeniable. She had lost people, good people, and the path ahead wasn't clear. But there was one thing she knew for sure. She couldn't let the darkness consume her. There had been moments when she had felt utterly lost, when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But every time she thought she couldn't take another step, there was something inside her that wouldn't let her quit. A burning, fierce need to keep going, even when she had no idea where the road would lead. The people she had lost, the mysteries she had uncovered, they would always be part of her. But they didn't define her. She was not just the woman who uncovered a dark conspiracy. She was more than that. She was a person who had stood in the face of overwhelming odds and, despite it all, had made the choice to keep searching for the truth. It was a lonely path, and there were moments when the weight of everything she had learned threatened to break her spirit. But there was also hope. Hope that by exposing the darkness, she had set things in motion that could one day lead to change, however small that might be. Because in the end, the truth didn't belong to her alone. It belonged to everyone who had been affected by the lies, by the manipulation. And as long as people like her, people who were willing to fight for it, kept searching, maybe, just maybe, one day the full story would come to light. But as Sarah looked out at the horizon, a shiver ran down her spine. The questions that had plagued her had not all been answered. The key she had found, the hidden vault, the people who had been involved, none of it had been fully resolved. And as much as she wanted to believe she could walk away, there was a part of her that knew better. There were still pieces missing. Still dangers lurking in the shadows, things that she couldn't yet see, but that she knew, deep down, were waiting. The final twist hadn't yet been revealed. Somewhere, out there, Marcus was still watching. Somewhere, the conspiracy still breathed, hidden beneath the surface of normalcy. And as much as Sarah wanted to turn away from it all, she knew she could never forget. She had seen too much, uncovered too many secrets. The darkness was still there, lingering in the corners of her mind, whispering her name. It was then that she received another message. The same anonymous sender, the same chilling tone. You don't know the half of it yet. Her blood ran cold. She didn't need to read any more. The truth, as she had feared, was far from over. It was just beginning.